Today we're going to do a quick video on model mappers. So what is this and why do we need it? Let's create a Spring Boot application here real quick. I'm going to use IntelliJ. In this project, I'm going to call it Test Mapper, Java, Maven, Test Mapper. I'll use my domain, Thomas J. Consulting. I'll use Java 8. I'm going to create a jar, go next. I'm going to use 2.7.10. I'm going to add in Lombok. And for the web components, I'm going to add in Spring Web. Okay. And let's go create. Okay, we can see our application started on port 8080. So let's go through quickly and create some simple REST endpoints. We'll create a new package called controller. We'll create a REST controller in that package. We'll annotate that as a REST controller. Since I added Lombok in there, I can also add SL4J for my logging. And I can add in here an annotation for a base path for my request mapping. And we'll make that API/v1. And then we'll create a get mapping. And that get mapping will be user. And for now, I'll just return a simple public string get user and return an empty string. Okay, let's see if this works so far. Okay, this is working great. And let's go through and create a service. So we'll go through and create another package called service. I'm going to create a Java class in here, and I call this user service. And in this user service, I will annotate as a service. And I'll also add in SL4J. And we'll add in here a simple get user. So I will have a user DTO, data transfer object. And this will be get user for my service. And then I have to return something in here. So I now need to have a user DTO. So I'm going to create another package. And this is going to be my DTOs. I'll make that lowercase. And here we'll create a file user DTO. And in this user DTO, I will annotate with an @data using Lombok, and this will create all my getters and setters. So I can have a private string ID, private string first name, private string last name, private string full name. Okay. And now on our models, let's go through and create a package for models. And I'll create a model. This can be something like a user editor, something such as that, for user. And in here, I will create a private string ID, private string first name, private string last name, private string email, and private string password. Typically you would have passwords in your objects, but this is important for me to show you what I want you to see in here. And we'll annotate this with data as well, so Lombok can create all of our getters and setters. So now we have a user object, and this might be what you expect from an entity. So in our user service, I'm going to say get a user, and in here I'm just going to say mock DB call, for example. I'm going to say my user equals new user. I'll create one of these. I will then import this user. I will import the DTO as well. And then the user will have the set ID. We will set the email as well. We'll set the first name. We'll set that as Bob. We'll set the last name as Smith. And we'll set the password as password. What else? Great. So now we have various information here. I need to make this set, not get. There we go. So now we have various information about a user, and I want to return a DTO. So I'm going to return a user DTO. But how do we create this? So this is where the mapping libraries will help us out. We can simply search for a Maven plugin for model mapper. So here's model mapper, and we'll get the 3.1 version. And this is a Maven information we need to put in. So we'll copy this. I'll add this to our POM file. We'll open our POM file. We'll add this into our dependencies. We'll go to our POM file and right click and go down to Maven Reload Project. It'll bring in that POM file. Now we need to create a mapper. So let's create another package, and we're going to call this a converter. So in our converter, we're going to have user DTO converter. So now that we have this, we can actually go through and we'll create this as a component. And we're going to use that component in our user service. So I'm going to auto wire this in, and this will be a user DTO converter. I will call it the same name, just for convention, the lowercase u. So this will now get mapped into this. And what we want to do is take this user DTO converter, and we need a method in here. It's going to be public. And we're going to return a user DTO. We're going to say convert. We're going to take in a user object. And somehow we're going to return a user DTO. So we can import and in here we want to say convert user to user DTO. We also want to have a reverse method, maybe where we return a user and we pass in a user DTO. So in this case, we're converting a user DTO to a user. But in any case, back at our user service, we now have our user DTO converter, and we can say in here, user DTO equals our user converter convert user to DTO, and we can pass in our user. And this will now return the information. So let's go back to the converter again, and we'll see there's a couple errors here. Let's go ahead and finish these errors real quick. So over here we need to have an instance of our model mapper, and let's bring that in as a private model mapper. Model mapper. So since it's going to be multiple instances of this, we don't want to have to go through and create that. So what we want to do is actually create a bean somewhere with this. So we'll use the auto wire in here. And at this point, it says it doesn't find a bean of that name. So we will have to take care of that in a moment. In our convert to DTO, we can simply map between that. So with our model mapper, we can simply say user DTO equals model mapper. We can pass in our user and define this. So we'll say user DTO.class. And this will then attempt to map from one to the other. .map. Here we go. Okay, so now we need to make sure this is defined somewhere. And then on the opposite end of it, we're going to map the other direction. So let's just copy the same line. And we'll say from a user, we're going to map from a user DTO object to a user class. Okay, so it's mapping the opposite direction. Now we need to resolve this. We need to create a bean somewhere for that. Or we could instantiate it here, but I think it's cleaner to have a bean. So let's create another directory here. Package. And we're going to call it utils. And in this utils, I'm going to create another Java class. I'm going to call it mapper config. And in here, I'm going to call this simply a component. So it will be mapped in for the component scan. And then I'm going to create a new bean. And in this bean, I'm going to create a public model mapper. And this will return a new model mapper. So this should resolve our bean interface now. Yep. Okay, so this is the basics of it. Let's go through and run this. So what we're going to do is make a call to our get to our port 8080 at /API/v1/getUser. We need to call our user service. So we're going to need to map the user service. We will auto wire it in here. And we need to add user service. And again, I'll call it the same name, just lowercase. And in here, I'm just going to call user service. Get user. And this is returning a user DTO. So I need to change this to user DTO for my return type. I'll import this type and it'll remove that error for now. Great. So let's go through and let's actually run this. We can start everything up. I'm going to use Postman to run this. Okay, we're going to use Postman, and we're going to go at http://8080/API/v1/user. We need to make this localhost :8080. There we go. Okay, and now we get back some information on our user. Again, this is our temporary user. Notice we get the ID, the first name, the last name, and the full name. We do not get the email or the password. So our model mapper only mapped in components based on what we had in our DTO. Now notice we don't have full name in there. What we can do is go to our converter, and I can add in here user DTO dot set full name, and I can make that user dot get first name plus space plus user get last name. Now if we wanted to add an email, it is as simple as going in to our user DTO and adding private string email. And that will now add our email into it. Let's stop this and restart it. Let's run this again. Now we see we have email, but the full name is not set. Let's take a look at that again. In our converter, we wanted this to be full name, not first name. There we go. If we look over here, we can see that our first name is actually Bob Smith. So that's not what we wanted. So let's restart this again. Now we see our full name, we see our email in there, and we see everything else all set up. Why are we using mappers? A couple reasons. To start with, we want to take the user or entity object, for example, and restrict information from outside the service, no matter what class is calling it, for example, password. In addition, we have other synthetic fields or calculated fields like full name that we want to populate, and we don't want to put that into the entity. Otherwise, our entity would have to have getters in there and it would have to do that business logic. So we removed our business logic out of the entity, and we have our DTO that can carry the information, but we moved our business logic into the mapping when needed. This could actually be calling another web service to get more details about the user. FYI, as you build this stuff, don't put passwords in a user entity. Put it in your authentication system. It's bad design to do that. I just showed it to show masking of the data. I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope it makes sense to you. Please take a look at my Udemy classes, my YouTube channel, and I do a lot of stuff on Java, Spring Boot, as well as some React Native mobile integration. Hope you enjoyed my video. Please subscribe and like. Thank you.